I'm a Trotskyist with Asperger's syndrome, has been writing Trotskyist blogs for 10 years, been a Trotskyist for 30 years. I want to describe how my father, Pat Brainey, was a Trotskyist, short of a couple of weeks or 3 weeks of 60 years of the Trotskyists in Canada and Britain, trained me and inspired me. He told me to read at 3 and 5. I troubled at the primary school because they didn't pick up the autism and the head teacher felt threatened and discriminated against me, so I had a lot of problems. But I started reading the Oxford History of Britain when I was 7, where I first heard of Karl Marx. When in secondary school, I was going to the library 8:30, 8:45 in the morning, and read about Plekhanov, the founder of Russian Marxism. First I heard of Plekhanov. I read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich when I was about 8, 9, 10. I've been reading Trotsky's writing since I've been 12. But one of the features of Asperger's syndrome is the obsession of one or two subjects. Marxism, being a Trotskyist in the framework of Marxism, sees the dialectical unity and independence and was distinct and interlinked with the sciences. So you're interested in everything. I want to talk about why socialism inspires me. Because the science could use to solve a lot of the problems of humanity. You've got ecological crisis. You've got the hurricanes, which happened in the Caribbean, 100, 500 events. There was natural, social, capitalism was starting them doing the damage. I'll work on an alternative which I'll go on to. The rising racism, the rising xenophobia, Trump, Le Pen, all the rottenness of the degenerating capitalist system that Trotsky analysed in the 1930s. You know about right-wing populism and fascism, with the rise of Hitler represents. Then we have the alternatives of the workers' states like China. They are lifting 400 million people out of poverty. They are linking up 4 or 5 continents, building ports, railways. Things the imperialists never did. Marx was right. Capitalism, greatest accomplishment, was the international division of labour. Overthrew feudalism in Western Europe, Japan, the United States, slavery, and the English capitalists for the first American War of Independence was progressive. But it was 90 to 90% reactionary in the colonies, set back the productive forces. As Marx said in the Crimean War, the most reactionary forces is the imperialists or the capitalists set up in the backward layers of the aristocracy of slavery, because that's how they made their profits and that's how they kept the working class in check, super exploited. That's how they kept their wealth. At the founding Congress of the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party, which is the first, was Lenin built up the Bolshevik Party a bit later, 5 years, 1903. Struve, who was a legal Marxist, so went over to Tsarism or liberalism, he said the further east you go, the more the capitalist class is reactionary. And that was somebody who wanted to be a legal Marxist, and there was an opportunist tendency or faction of which you have legal openings. Because they published Marxist writings in the 1870s. There's a debate, well, they did fear Marx as an academic. But the fact that it was let's not be sectarian. Why did they want to read Marx? It must signify something. It represents a radicalisation of the middle class intelligentsia. They didn't die out of strength but out of weakness. And as Trotsky said in defence of Marxism, all the neutral territories were about explosives, but the method of dialectical materialism led to the greatest socialist revolution in history, the October 1917 Socialist Revolution. As Max Eastman said on the anniversary of the Russian Revolution in 1928, the Russian Revolution, or the 50th anniversary, I can't remember, so we'll put this on, that the Russian Revolution was building up for 100 years. As Trotsky explained in his theory of the permanent revolution and his theory on even a combined development, that it's also said in this film Xena about his daughter committing suicide, and I'll go into that film a bit later. But what he said in that film is the capitalism, the West, the loans, not if I issue the Russian Revolution at the same point, the loans, the railways, all showing the Tsarism, were showing the backward semi-feudal elements. In 1905 they betrayed their own liberal bourgeois or liberal capitalist battles for democratic rights. They feared the working class, particularly with the workers' councils being set up, could overthrow them in the factories, because they had the biggest number of factories and civil exploitation of the factories. But now it was underripe, didn't have the forces for a capitalist revolution, but when it was overripe for a capitalist revolution, only the working class could lead it. That's the way called the ironies of history. It's in Xena. If you want to watch that quote, or if you don't want to read the book, it's in that film. But that's okay. So we dealt with the workers, some of the workers' states. What we're fighting for, you can't build socialism in one country. But what the productive forces are saying is the socialisation of labour. And Lenin, in his introduction, Lenin, when he wrote a biography of Marx in Encyclopedia Britannica in 1913, made the point, is socialism will only come about, and it has to come about an attached utopian socialist like Robert Owen. I thought you got the social democrats like Edward Burns in the late 19th century, 1898, thought capitalism was kind, it could be reformed. No, it comes out the fetter of capitalism can no longer do it the productive forces, it has to overthrow. Private property is an anachronism. Socialisation, even under capitalism, has crisis, convulsive crisis. We have 2 world wars, fascism, all the contradictions of that system, has to be overthrown, and complete socialisation of the means of production. Nationalisation of the means of production. It's a solution. The difference between Bernstein and social democracy and the utopian state is based on the capitalists. The Trotsky called labour bureaucracy, the trade bureaucracy, and the social democrat bureaucracy. The new middle class come out the labour movement. It makes that distinction. But what the answer to Trotskyism is, it's going to answer what Ernest Mandel and Joseph Hanson, the American Belgian Trotskyist Ernest Mandel, at the Unification Congress of the 4th of 1963, called the National Revolution Today, and that's still valid. It's a social revolution in the imperialist countries. That's the austerity, the fight against sexism, the fight against racism. I'll deal with Britain later, how the radicalisations are falling in Britain, when the socially oppressed, and then the Labour Party. I'll deal with that later. The fight against austerity, the fight against racism, the fight against the fight against imperialist wars are part of that strategy. But also the fight to stop the completion of capitalist restoration in Eastern Europe. The certain nationalised industry, despite the bureaucratic push, despite the capitalist inroads, which had to be preserved, defended, have the potential to defend. Trotsky, in his first document against Shachtmanites, when he was fighting against third campism, made the point where he says he can go through all kinds of crises with bureaucratic periods and capitalist inroads, but does he have the potential to go forward? Does it mean everything is lost? Because Shachtman, like all third campers, in the early stage of that dispute, downplayed capitalist restoration. He said it was long term. But every pillar's intervention to overthrow the workers' state is to weaken it dramatically and overthrow it. The phase had to manoeuvre in Eastern Europe. The case capitalism being restored is East Germany and Austria, one through reunification of classical workers' state apparatus, and for a major imperialist intervention of 11 weeks, or 72, 74 days, I can't remember the exact figure. But it's a downplay capitalist restoration. If capitalism is restored, you have massive privatisation, massive cutbacks. Now the logic of third capitalism is to take no sides, and that's slogan of neither Moscow nor Washington. But when things are defended, Ernest Mandel made that point against the predecessor of the British Socialist Workers' Party, the International Socialists, a brilliant poem called The Inconsistencies of State Capitalism. When there is mass privatisation, when there is imperialist war threatening the nuclear suicide and the attack on North Korea, then there's things you have to defend. In the real class struggle. And it's impossible not to defend the degenerated workers' state, or degenerate workers' state, or deformed workers' states, against imperialism, though it's impossible to be neutral, and there's rubbish in capitalists and workers. In fact, it's bigger gains. Trotsky said against the third campus, despite Stalinism, the workers' states are the highest gains. The better gains, rubbish of workers' democracy. But that is the concrete reality in the Stalinist generation of the first workers' state. The next thing, if the semi-colonial masses overthrow capitalism in the third world, challenge imperialism, they'll undermine the super exploitation of the third world. The fact they lost all these wars from Afghanistan to Iraq has weakened their ability, has caused a deepening economic crisis because they've wasted all that billions in Iraq and they haven't got the resources, so they can't get new markets. So that is deepening the capitalist crisis. But what we're saying so we talk about the imperialist kind of socialist revolution. In the workers' state, we defend the gains of the workers' state. We prefer the Stalinist box to the political revolution, because the Russians will not go away peacefully. In the third world, what the strategy of the permanent revolution is. There's been a significant radicalisation in Britain since the mid-90s. The ironic thing was, the dialectical opposite, Blair was trying to turn Labour into a capitalist party. And but with the British radicalisation of 1945, bigger radicalisation in some respects, bigger number of seats, despite right-wing policies, because there was radicalisation for more money on the public services and renationalised certain things which he was against. But in the end, as far as the EU project, had to make concessions. You don't want the Tory party bragging to ruin the EU project like they're doing now. So they're having populist wing. But because the left was out to left, did not organise, they could have got the millions of workers and brought them not just from Blairism but from reformism and moved towards real left politics, further left than Corbyn, towards revolutionary politics, because they're out to left and not get involved in these concrete post demands on the Blairites, defeat them, defeat the different wings of social democracy that played into his hands. They've been left almost anyway. I also think there's been left tendencies of support the oppressed, big anti-war movements, big shop for abortion rights, gay marriage, a bit of radicalisation. Then you've had the xenophobia, racism, factionalism, defence, the British National Party, UKIP, all these contradictions. But the radicalisation is deepening because the politics I hope are deepening. I think one example of this, J.K. Rowling is trying to attack abortion rights and he doesn't believe in any circumstances, and gay marriage. It's very significant. It shows the enormous radicalisation of women. 66% of women, 66% in the opinion polls support the woman's right to choose to have an abortion. That is, or keep the child. That is an enormous radicalisation. The same with gay marriage, which is the alliance of the oppressed, of the working class and the oppressed. And that is the other thing about the Russian Revolution, the women, the Jewish middle class and working class, the oppressed nationality, 80% of the peasants, all the permanent revolution, managed to be persuaded by doing that in the command revolutionary strategy. But what Pat taught me, I read all those documents, played all these roles. I wrote documents speaking, I'm going to put my blogs on there, which I've been writing for 10 years. The thing to fight for socialism is the bright future, but life and death instantly couldn't come out, and there could be asteroids destroy this planet. There could be, so I'm talking 1.1 million years ago, of heat coming from another solar system, heating up the whole solar system, with life not being durable. But scientific theory is important. As Trotsky said against Burnham, you don't mess around with cables unless you know what you're doing, and brain operations or your equipment, for example, in the industry. You've got to be scientific, you've got to know theory and practice. But now let's find out what DNA came from through the chemical process, and oxygen. Go artificial oxygen, go to the carbon dioxide, plant the trees. I mean, the satellites in Africa where they can reforest the forests and by desertification, which the transport states doing, that shows the potential of putting artificial water in there and using the satellites to merge stars, if we can work it out theoretically. To stop the heat coming in from the other solar system going out. Perhaps fight for socialism was like medicine and science, and the space, because we only got the planet going chance anyway. But we don't know to be life elsewhere. I'll finish here. But the bright socialist future is coming.